Okay, so a very warm good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the seminar committee of the Department of History, I welcome everyone here. Professor Latif, extending a warm welcome to you on behalf of the seminar committee at Department of History. Dr. Riyaz Latif is an art historian and teaches at Flame University in Pune. He received his PhD in the history of art in 2011 from the University of Minnesota for his work on the Marinid Sultanate of North Africa. Dr. Latif has previously taught at Wellesley College and Vanderbilt University in the United States of America. He's written on various aspects of art, cultural, and literary phenomena as they pertain to the Islamic and Indo-Persianate world. His book with Dr. Pushkar Sohani, Sultanate Ahmedabad and its Monuments, is forthcoming from Trimus Books this year. Dr. Latif has also emerged as a significant voice in Urdu poetry with his use of complex but fresh poetic imagery. Besides two collections of Urdu poems, Hindsa Bekhab Raton Ka, 2006, and Adam Tarash, 2016, as well as a book of translations from European poets titled Mera Khoya Awaza, 2014, he has published a number of critical essays and has translated Urdu poetry and fiction into English. He is speaking today on Decoding the Strange in Buzurg Ibn Shahriyar's Kitab Ajaib al-Hind, Book of the Wonders of India. Thank you so much, Dr. Latif, for being here, and I give the stage to you now.
Okay, thank you so much. So thank you for this kind introduction. So, and thank you, Raji Saab, as well as the seminar committee for inviting me. Thank you all for being here. And so, as you are all well aware, my aim is to engage with the notion of Ajaib, wonders, in relation to the 10th century compilation of the seafarers' tales. They're all under the title Kitab, Ajaib al-Hind. And by this, and they're all recorded or gathered by this sea captain called Buzurg ibn Shahriyar al-Ram Hormuzi. So apparently he was from this place called Ram Hormuz in the area of Khuzistan in the Persian Gulf. Right. And we can tentatively date this work to the middle of the 10th century, around 953 CE or so. But that said, see, at the outset, I must confess that as I was talking to Riyaz, that I'm a little confounded about what to say, especially in the context of gleaning any insights related to the operations of Ajaib, right, in these tales, and offer any thoughts by the ways of conclusion, inferences. So what exactly do you really say about them? So that is where I'm a little still confounded, basically. And so, because see, in your proposal, we tend to kind of make these claims and ask these lofty questions and so on and so forth, as I might have done if you read the proposal. But I will have no ready answers. That's what I'm trying to tell you. And I know it is it's nearly customary to say that this is a work in progress, and these are very, very preliminary forays into this material or subject matter. But all those platitudes aside, this is actually true in this case. I should let you know, because see, I mean, even within my disciplinary art historical bounds, I am navigating really new waters here, completely unknown ones, right? In terms of my relation to my other work, right? So, but this whole dynamic of kind of wonder as a literary genre, talismanic kind of notions in the art world, as well as kind of a cosmographical, and all this in relation to the medieval Islamic cultural expression. So I think it's a fascinating way of kind of really looking at or entering this Islamic world. And as in more recent times, there's increasingly more scholarship kind of coming out in this particular domain too. Right. So that is what is really fascinating to me, and as a consequence, I have been kind of rash enough to kind of today to make kind of forays into Buzurg's kind of text again a very superficial manner, right? So this is my appeal. I mean, Razi Saab is here, Parul Pandya, and all these are the people whose work I really admire. I look up to them. So, my appeal would be that, please kind of, indulge me, and kind of, forgive my shortcomings. So that's what I'm going to say before I begin there, right? So, and another disclaimer. Ostensibly the title kind of speaks about kind of the Ajaib in Buzurg ibn Shahriyar's text. But as you will see, Buzurg kind of will kind of feature a way later, because my primary aim is to really kind of focus on the dynamics of Ajaib or Ajab itself. Wonder, strange, fantastic. So when we actually reach Buzurg's text or kind of start speaking about it, that will be after I lay down a lot of kind of other larger kind of the context in the preface, right? So, if with that in kind of mind, if we begin with the idea, the notion of Ajab, right? That is wonder, So it almost kind of becomes a trope which is kind of deployed in a range of cultural understandings in the pre-modern Islamic world. That's one thing. So and we see primarily manifest in the textual or literary kind of lexical exposition, so to speak. And of course, I mean, all these to a large extent, there'll be this graphic equivalent to it, illustrated manuscripts and so on and so on, a visual component to that entire kind of sensibility. So this is an overarching kind of idea about Ajaib and kind of the way it kind of develops in the medieval Islamic world. So Ajab, in its broadest formulation, I would say, it encompasses a sense of awe, wonder, this sheer kind of incomprehensibility in the face of God's creation. If I was to kind of provide an overarching definition, right? So the core questions are being that, how does one come to terms with that? How does one imagine, understand one's own world through this wonder, through this incredulity, which is kind of unfathomable a lot of time, right? How does one express it? So these are the core questions kind of related to the whole issue of wonder at that point. So as a mode of understanding, as a device, Ajab or Ajaib, and the plural Ajaib is also used for wondrous objects, events, Ajaib. So, and Tajub, the sense of wonder, right? So all these kind of, it has a frequent occurrence in kind of the medieval Arabic and the corresponding Persian corpus. So much so that it also kind of features in the descriptions of craft as well as expressions of beauty. Okay, so I mean, to kind of just illustrate, give you one example. I mean, there's this example. There's a whole notion about the aesthetics of Ajab, the aesthetics of wonder, and so in the context of someone speaking about the Abbasid period ceramics, lusterware. So in terms of its opulence, in terms of its kind of techniques of kind of really making it almost like unreal shiny light. So that the way the light reflects off its surface and so on and so forth, it becomes almost so unreal in terms of its opulence. And that is what really induces or really kind of generates a sense of wonder, Ajaib. So it is in that sense that Ajab is also spoken of within the context of craft, beauty, aesthetics, so on and so forth, right? So that's one aspect of it, and it is also understood, and I quote a medieval author's definition, that denial or refusal of something that appears to us due to its lack of ordinariness. There's something extraordinary about it. And it's our denial, our refusal to understand it, basically. That kind of induces that wonder. That's one part of it. And so this is accompanied by a sense of bewilderment that comes to people due to their incapability of knowing the cause of something. You see, I mean, if you're confounded about the cause of something, and that kind of produces that bewilderment, And that also kind of really kind of ties up with this whole notion of Ajaib, right? And see, as other medieval author puts it, it is a desirable feeling. Now, it is interesting. He says it is a desirable feeling that stems from one's inability to comprehend an event, object, phenomenon, or process. Why? Because it is too wondrous, it's too great, it's almost miraculous, right? And so we also I'm sure you also are encountered this the Western term mirabilia, which really correlates with Ajab and Wonder. So mirabilia, no, which is the things, objects, artifacts, events, no, that inspire wonder, and usually or specifically miraculous events or the phenomena that come across as miraculous. Right? So this is this kind of setting the stage for Ajab and the way it was kind of perceived or defined or whatever, even within the pre-modern Islamic world. Right? So all this said, we see that Ajab finds its manifestation in pre-modern Islamic cultural expression to diverse ends. Even within the manuscript production as a literary genre, as it develops, you see its diverse effects, and subtly in a way. So and I'm when I say this, I'm trying to cast the net a little wide in terms of appropriating the understanding of Ajab in a comprehensive sense, as comprehensive as one can probably think of possibly. Right? So with this kind of backdrop, let me attempt to give you a quick inventory of Ajab or the Ajaib and its operations as one of the propelling forces in a range of texts and manuscripts, and these lead to a range of effects, right? So for instance, say one aspect of it, the sense of wonder or awe and its manipulation in negotiating power relations, for instance, right? And primarily it kind of really operates in kind of completely dazzling the opponent right here. Right? So here, I mean, the point is that the whole mechanism is consciously or unconsciously geared towards assertions of authority, power, legitimacy, and so on and so forth. Right? And not only objects, but architectural space, elements, its functions, the ceremonials attached to it, right? The way it is all so all this together, there's this ensemble. It's almost like it's curated to create this overwhelming sense of Ajab, wonder, fascination. This completely unreal kind of thing, right? So to illustrate this, let me speak to you about there's this very well-known episode recorded in an early text from 11th century, right? And this is the visit of the Byzantine emperors, pardon me, the Byzantine ambassadors to Abbasid Baghdad. And in 917, during the reign of the Khalif al-Muqtadir. Right? And so it speaks about the way these ambassadors, these emissaries, were actually led through the city for for the longest time. And then ultimately they were led through a labyrinth of palatial spaces, right? Apparently for several days, almost ranging to a month, even before they were formally ushered into the presence of the Khalif. So you can see, I mean, the way how to impress them dominantly. I mean, for a month or so, they are just entertained, taken around, no appointment with the Khalif, right? And this information comes to us from this 11th century historian scholars text and called Ibn al-Khatib al-Baghdadi. And there's a text called Tarikh Madinat al-Salam, which is the history of Baghdad, right? And so let me very randomly quote a few excerpts from that, basically. So it will give you a sense of what I mean. But see, the entire text is a little long. I just read you some parts, basically. So he said that it was commanded that the ambassadors should be taken around the palace. Now, there are no soldiers there, but only eunuchs and chamberlains in the black pages. And the number of eunuchs was 7,000 in all, 4,000 of them white and 3,000 black, and so on and so forth. So just the sheer number, it's supposed to overwhelm you. And then as they go around, when the ambassadors entered the palace of the tree, they gazed upon the tree, and then the astonishment was great, for they saw birds fashioned out of silver whistling with every motion while perched on a tree of silver weighing 500 dirhams. Right. So this whole Ajaib, fantastic thing basically. But then they kind of know they are led to these places because with all these hangings and jewelries and kind of all these kind of platters of filled with jewels and diamonds, all belonging to the Khalif and whatnot. So it just keeps on going, no? And then there's a whole bestiary with animals and birds and so on and so forth. Right. So they keep on going. For instance, see, the envoys walked over such carpets all the way from the limit of the new official gate right to the presence of the Khalif, but this number did not include the fine rugs and chambers and so on and so forth. Then they go to the park of the wild beasts, and then see, the envoys passed to what was called a new kiosk, which is in the palace in the midst of two gardens. In the center was an artificial pond of white lead, around which flows a stream of white lead more lustrous than polished silver. Now we also have all these accounts of these pools of mercury and so on and so forth. Right. So they are led through all these places, and there's magnificent boats and gilts and seats and so on and so forth. Then again, they kind of go get into the other garden, the palace of a tree, where there is a tree standing in the midst of a great circular pond filled with clear water. The tree has 18 branches, every branch having numerous twigs, on which sit all sorts of gold and silver birds, both large and small. Most of the branches of this tree are of silver, but some of gold, and they spread into air carrying the leaves of diverse colors, so on and so forth. So this is the whole scenario. The description goes on and on and on, and then finally, then at length, after the ambassadors had thus been taken around 23 various palaces, they were brought forth to the court of 90, and ultimately, and finally, after all this ceremonial paraphernalia, they came again to the presence of the Khalif Muqtadir, who they found in the palace of the crown upon the bank of the Tigris, and so on and so forth. Anyway, so I hope this gives you a sense of how what I'm trying to tell you about the Ajaib, and its real deployment in all this to really create this sense of awe, wonder, and ultimately submission, on the part of the envoys, basically. Right. So as I said, it will be clear that the composite presence of Ajaib is already actively operational in the cultural and political arena of the medieval Islamic world. Right. But concurrently and later, we see it developing as a literary genre. Right. Primarily in the textual corpus of histories, cosmographies, taxonomies, travelogues, so on and so forth. Okay. So, and then see a diverse range of books and texts will attest to this. Yeah. So for example, let me start sharing the screen. Sorry, I should have done that with this PowerPoint. Okay, I hope the screen is visible to everyone. Right? Right? So for example, see, within the context of this textual production, manuscripts, illustrated manuscripts, there is this, this Kitab al-Hind by al-Jahiz, this polymath of the 8th, 9th centuries. And it's a book of animals, so it really deals with natural world animals, and it's almost like creating these taxonomies. So you see, and I'm showing you, I hope you can see the next image, right here. So I'm showing you a few pages from Kitab al-Hind, and so these are the ones, but these renderings are from the 13th century, but the original text dates to 8th, 9th century. Right. Along with this, what we'll see is this standard the large fables in volumes. The most important, the most well-known being Alf Layla wa Layla, the 1001 Nights. Right. So with its fantastic stories and fairies and jinns and magicians and sorcerers and so on and so forth, distant lands, travels, Sinbad. So and so all this this tales within tales within tales will have oftentimes they'll also have a didactic moral purpose to them. Right. Similarly, I mean, actual travelogues. Like there's a travelogue from which dates back to the 11th, 12th century by this Andalusian traveler called Abdul Hamid al-Gharnati. Tuhfatul al-Bab. The gift of the heart. Where distant lands, topographies, ethnographies, customs, strangeness, wonder, fantastic. So this all is embedded in the narrative. And in one sense, even Buzurg, what we speak of, the Buzurg in the Shahriyar's episodes, I mean the collected tales, they essentially really kind of encompass these kind of these kind of motifs. So that is one thing. Then along with this, there's a whole development of manuscripts which are dedicated to what are the stories or the tales related to the miraculous night journey of the Prophet, right? Miraj Nama. There's an entire kind of genre which kind of comes up, and with its corresponding cosmographical imagery. And later, especially in the 14th, 15th century, you see a lot of renderings of Miraj Nama in actually visual terms. I'm just going to show you, these two images from Miraj Nama from the Timurid period, basically, as you can see here. And so, as you see, this is all kind of inscribed in the entire imagery of Ajaib, wonder. I mean, as the Prophet makes his night journey and the encounters with angels in the form of angels, and kind of the episodes, the behaviors, and the ways able to kind of move through that entire kind of realm of heavens and what. So as you'll see here in these two images, it is very graphically brought out. The element of Ajaib is kind of graphically brought out here in the Miraj Nama stories. Along with that, see, I mean, in the same kind of time frame, I primarily speak of 12th, 13th, 14th centuries now here. You see, I mean, there's one interesting manuscript called the Maqamat of Al-Hariri. And so these are, I mean, Al-Hariri being the author, a Baghdadi author, and he flourishes in 13th century. That is where it is written. And these are all these assemblies of Al-Hariri where he speaks of these little kind of stories within stories. And they all kind of deal with the escapades or the adventures of this real trickster called Abu Zaid. So where he kind of moves around, travels, and again, these are all kind of assemblies. There's a lot to do with language and pun and so on and so forth. But it kind of brings this larger Islamic world into the scenario through these tales, and the connectivities with the maritime connectivities and so on and so forth. So in terms of Abu Zaid's movements, you will also see kind of this whole idea of literally the idea of Ajab and Ajaib, these fantastic islands, the creatures kind of coming in. So here you see this image, the next one, and this is the shipfaring activities in this time. So the Maqamat column also speaks of that. And what you see where I'm moving my cursor, what you see is this an Indian ship with the Indian seafarers and sailors. And also it is interesting in terms of its rendering though. It shows you some kind of stylized details here. See, for instance, you see this where I'm moving my cursor here, and I just threw this image to kind of show you, the making of this this wooden kind of boats and doors and planks and so on and so forth. So the way of kind of tying up the plank together until the 19th century was exactly to this coconut quires, and as you see here, this is a detail from this boat in Kerala. So which is plow the Indian Ocean from the coast of the Gulf onto the western coasts of India. So this is one thing, but the Maqamat also interestingly has all these episodes and kind of renderings of this fantastical things, the Eastern Isles, as you see. So this is also an illustration from Maqamat and a detail from that. You see all these fantastic creatures and all. So that whole world of Ajaib, or rather I should kind of flip the whole thing, that the understandings of that world through the fantastic are all completely embedded in the larger cultural production of the Islamic world at this point in time, right? Along with this, what you see another two things. One other manifestation of the Ajab, it is also mirrored in actual tangible objects. And so most pertinently in these mechanical kind of objects and toys, which we term as automata, right? Mechanical toys, water clocks, and so on and so forth. Largely they were created for or designed for this entertainment of princes and so on and so forth. And and this too kind of we have all this information because of this 13th, 14th century text. No, it is a compendium, no, of this author, this polymath called Al-Jazari. No, and it is titled The Book of the Knowledge of Ingenious Devices. And there, no, it's a technological manuscript, no, which is dated to 13th, 14th century. No. And there you see several examples of constructing such mechanical toys and automata. But no, I mean, it is again the core principle. No, the idea of Ajab, wonder in the creation of the construction, is already embedded there. So that is also one end that kind of the whole notion of Ajaib takes. And see, I'm just showing you these 2-3 images from that manuscript here. As you see, the center one is this elephant clock, right? And so, I mean, is this whole wondrous contraption, and the descriptive text also kind of really informs you, instructs you how to construct this. Some of them work, some of them don't. But what you'll see here is this kind of elephant clock, which kind of with this bird kind of chimes, and then there's a metal ball which falls into the face of this dragon-like creature, is regurgitated out, and the moment it falls into this ball, this mahot, he strikes the elephant, and the clock strikes basically. Anyway, along with that, along with these mechanical devices, there are also in this very highly functional kind of practical mechanical technological devices, right? But you see, I mean, in this range of manuscripts with a range of functions, with range of intentions, you see how kind of Ajaib is, or Ajab, the idea of notion Ajab, the sensibility of Ajab is kind of all pervades this kind of expression, right? So that's one part of it. And finally, in the context of Ajaib, as I said, but over and above all this, right, as a genre, Ajab, the Ajab, it really gets codified in the 12th, 13th century, as I told you. And a supreme exemplar of all this codification is this 13th century manuscript by this, again, the author, a polymath called Abu Yahya Zakaria al-Qazwini, right? And this text, it's a very popular kind of opus, which is called Ajaibul Makhluqat wa Gharaibul Mawjudat, which means the wonders of creation and the oddities of existence, right? And so several illustrated kind of copies of this text have been made over time, from early 13th century and later, almost up to 19th century. In Arabic, it has its Persian kind of counterparts too. And this is, and in this text, with illustrated manuscript, the Qazwini actually divides the text into various sections and subsections. And see, broadly, these texts, wonders of creation, it deals with these kind of diverse kind of topics, nominally divided. So it is one section or subdivision will deal with supra-terrestrial beings or terrestrial beings, right? And the subdivisions, heavenly bodies, suns, fixed stars, constellations, so on and so forth. Then there's a whole section on the denizens of heaven, cosmography, angels, their characteristics, so on and so forth. So it starts almost relating to the kind of the imagery of the Miraj now, in that sense, right? Elements, winds, wind, thunder, air, lightning, rainbows, so on and so forth. Then there's something more earthly, Iklim, the climate, climes, lands, seas, distant lands, mineral world, animal world, vegetal world, so on and so forth. Flora, fauna, those taxonomies that kind of come into play. Then it becomes a little more fantastic. It's kind of, it starts kind of recording all the different types of jinns, genies, demons, creeping things, real oddities of kind of nature, monsters, oddities, forms of angels, so on and so forth and forth. Right. So see, with this kind of description, let me kind of quickly kind of flash to you some illustrations from the images, of the manuscripts of Ajaibul Makhluq. So it kind of gives you at least some graphic sense of kind of how embedded this whole notion of Ajab, wonder, fantastic, strange, it kind of becomes in the larger kind of sensibility of the pre-modern medieval Islamic world, in terms of its cultural production. So here, take a look. So you see, these are some, and I've just picked up random images, and But no, this kind of shows you this whole animal world and so on and so forth and whatnot. We even this trees and stuff like that. Then you have these, the more oddities. This creature called the tannin. So you have these renderings of that, and then along with fish, the human-headed fish, the flying fish, and all these birds and whatnot. And here, you have this large mythical creature called the Ruh, which kind of rescues a man or something in this. Then, of course, these kind of elements you see in this rendering. So this kind of almost semi-mythical beasts and stuff like that. Okay, and finally, you see here angels and kind of these other kind of completely kind of supra-terrestrial creatures, right? So this is where we kind of arrive in the context of Ajaib and its kind of developments in the medieval Islamic world, right? So with this, so this was the long drawn out context, as I told you earlier, of Ajaib, and to arrive at Buzurg ibn Shahriyar's actual Ajaib al-Hind, which actually predates this Qazvini's text. This is 13th century, but as you know, Ajaib al-Hind by Buzurg, that compilation, it dates to the middle of the 10th century, right? But as I told you, in Qazvini's text here, now the genre of Ajaib is really consolidated. So in earlier work like Buzurg, that we'll kind of speak about, one encounters Ajab and wonder and so on and so forth in a yet non-distinctive manner, so to speak, where it is yet a subordinate element in the works of Arab or Persian geographers, travelers, cosmographers, so on and so forth. So it seems that the idea of wonder reaches its fullest conceptual and expressive form at the hands of 13th century cosmographers. So what happens there is that the element of travel, geography, ethnography, so on and so forth. So later that shifts its emphasis to the marvelous, the anecdotal, and so on and so forth. So that is what happens now with the development of Ajab, so to speak, right? So as you know, so speaking of that, when you speak of Kitab, Ajaib al-Hind, so if you now speak of Buzurg's work fundamentally, it is, as you know, a collection of travelers and seafarers' tales, in which what happens is the sensational and the wondrous is also kind of mixed with the results of more sober observations, so to speak. Right. So now see, not much is known about Buzurg, except that he came from a place close to Ram Hormuz in Khuzestan, was a sea captain, and is credited with compiling or recording this whole book, Kitab Ajaib al-Hind, the wonders of India. And in all probably it was all kind of done in the date seems to be 953. Right? So now see, ostensibly, right, it's a collection of travel narratives, seafarers' tales, right? Sailors' yarns. It's almost like a collection of sailors' yarns, which is replete with these stories, basically. But some of them are these longer anecdotes, some are really tiny ones, almost oftentimes one-liners, right? But so interestingly, in this Buzurg's compilation of Ajaib al-Hind, it seems to be that there was no specific purpose to the Buzurg's compiling. It comes across as that. So as the translator, Freeman Grenville, he says that it almost seems that his object is to please, to amuse, to entertain with a fund of stories garnered from other shipmasters and sea captains. So those names figure pretty dominantly in the entire series of tales that which kind of makes up Ajaib al-Hind, the Kitab Ajaib al-Hind. And so, but the point is that after, even though there seems to be no ostensible purpose for this compilation, but if you look at the stories and tales, these are not entirely frivolous, right? Because as we soon discern a pattern of recurring themes which these tales seem to privilege. It seems to emerge, even in a very subtle manner. So broadly, we could say that so in terms of its spread, right? I mean, it plots kind of a maritime world stretching from the east coast of Africa, no, to the Arabian Gulf and kind of India, especially western coast of India. Right? Well, interestingly, there is no mention of the ports on the eastern coast of India, and then kind of it moves on to the Southeast Asia, no, the Malay Peninsula, the islands of Java, Sumatra, and so on and so forth, and all the way to China. So that is the range, that is the world you are looking at fundamentally, right? So see, for instance, here, this is the map. As you, if you can see the next image, no, so these are the places mentioned in the wonders of India. So this is the Indian Ocean world that kind of it brings into its orbit, right? This Buzurg tales, right? So see, so in terms of no, in the tales, what you encounter is these narratives of seafaring experiences, distant lands, islands, trade routes, goods, so on and so forth, right? Maritime experiences, that is also kind of, it certainly forms a part of this entire tales and narratives. Perils at the sea, tragedies, no, but also navigational aptitude. How, and it's oftentimes it is couched in the whole redemptive qualities of Islam and religion. No, so see, it's also it's, I mean, along with the peril of the sea, you know, there are all these stories about kind of, you know, these fantastic creatures kind of saving or kind of leading the sailors to, you know, out of the storms and so on and so forth. Redemptive qualities, right? So that also is there. Then along with that, of course, no, I mean, a significant part of this entire narrative, all these different tales, is the othering, no, the other strange places, customs, rituals, encounters, so on and so forth. And then, of course, creatures bordering on the fantastic, animals, aquatic creatures, fishes, whales, lobsters, monkeys, so on and so forth. So I mean, I'm just kind of, you know, really kind of, you know, enlisting all the kind of, you know, diverse kind of motifs which are all present in Buzurg ibn Shahriyar's tales, right? And so, in some way or the other, as you'll see, this is all grounded in the dynamic of Ajaib in its own way. No, not as pronounced as you see in the later text, like Qazwini's text, but it is still there in terms of its overall operation, right? So to recap, no, very quickly, no, these tales, no, they encompass the Indian Ocean world from East Africa, Arabian Gulf, Peninsula, Western Indian coast, and no, Suvarna Deep. I mean, so the land of gold. So South East Asia, Java, Sumatra, no, Funsur, Lamuri, these are the names which kind of, know, so as you see here in the map, they're all equated with these lands of gold, right? And then, no, I mean, and ultimately, there's also a mention of, no, China and Lubin and so on and so forth in one or two episodes. So this is the world that it kind of, so it really encompasses, right? And so, and if you see Kitab Ajaib al-Hind, no, it records 136 tales, no. Now, so actually, if you see the original text, actually, there's only one, apparently the old copy that exists in the collection of the Hagia Sophia Mosque Library. That is the original, out of which, you know, an earlier French translation was made, and then the English translations with all this, you know, rectifications and modifications and so on and so forth. So the numbers to the tales, you know, these episodes, that is kind of given by the translator. So in all, the kind of total 236 episodes, long and short, arranged quite randomly with no particular concern for an order or a progression. These random tales, you know, there's no kind of, no specific kind of how shall I say, a structure or an order to it, no, thematically or otherwise, right? But as I stated earlier, no, these tales are not entirely frivolous, right? And there are some themes that seem to recur and stand out, no, even as a kind of reading between the lines and text. So to broadly recount the most representative ones, no, we have episodes that speak of, you know, primarily conversion to Islam, no, and kind of the redemptive aspects of the religion. In fact, the very first tale, no, is of that. How the Kashmiri kind of a ruler or a king kind of converts to Islam clandestinely and so on and so forth. And so these kind of, no, tales, no, where Islam is kind of embedded somehow, no, in very prominently or even subtly, you know, these are not infrequent, these references to religion and whatnot. So in that sense, these kind of tales almost have a very subtle kind of didactic, almost like a proselytizing charge to it, which privileges that. Right. Then along with that, I mean, as I said, the whole strange, the other, and so on and so forth. So it's almost like creating that other too, something which is kind of not readily comprehensible in terms of even people, ethnographies, cultures, customs, so on and so forth. So you'll also see this kind of a few kind of tales which deal with Hindu customs, so to speak. Kind of pretty bizarre one of them. For instance, there's a one-liner, which speaks of some live cremations, which kind of seems bizarre, and it says that that they say in Upper India, it is customary to burn old people, both men and women. Now, I don't know what to really make of that, but no, you see these kind of real recordings also in Buzurg's texts, right? Ritual suicides. So that is also kind of in a couple of instances you also kind of encounter that, and I'll read out one episode to you at later. Right. Then tales of tragedies at sea, miraculous savings, profitable kind of voyages, so on and so forth. Miraculous deliverance. So see, I mean, so all these episodes are they're tied up with that, but it kind of also give you some kind of subterranean information about the operations in the Indian Ocean world, maritime. There's occasional mention of cannibalism too, cannibalism in the islands of Zanj, the east coast of Africa, even here, in Zabaj and these regions. Right. Maritime acumen, navigational techniques and whatnot, or even as they go inland streams, because oftentimes there's a mention of these regions on the coast of Makran, the port of Mansoura and whatnot, and then through the Indus River, they could go. I mean, the whole trading activities take upstream. So there's one episode which speaks about the raft of grain, how kind of grain were kind of made into this perspective with this large kind of the sacks, then covered with kind of some waterproof kind of material, and then those kind of were tied together as a raft and kind of how they carried downstream all the way for trading purposes. So you have all this kind of interesting information too along with that. And then, of course, anecdotes about animals, birds, fish, whales, lobsters, so on and so forth. Right. So these are kind of the. I mean, so we find that in most tales, all these are kind of really kind of taken or kind of recorded as hearsay. So from other ship masters and other sailors and so on and so forth. But even those characters, I mean, they're real life flash in blood because they often recur. So you see, I mean, he actually quotes other mariners and shipmasters, experienced shipmasters and whatnot. And so the names such as I mean, with the Nisba called Sirafi from Siraf or Allama. There's one guy called Ismail Vaya. They recur frequently. As Ismail Vaya told me or narrated to someone and he heard from someone. So there is this particular kind of thread to it. And often in a couple of tales here, you also see a reference to or kind of in that episode, the Khalif, the Abbasid Khalif that I mentioned, Al-Muqtadir, he also kind of makes an appearance. So the point is that in these stories, a lot of them are also resolutely kind of grounded in that particular time and frame of the Indian Oceanic world, 10th century. Right. Along with all this kind of this whole propensity for kind of speaking of strange, wondrous, fantastical things, as these mariners have encountered, so to speak. Not only things and objects and animals and fishes, but also customs, also relationships, also behavioral things. So this is in a nutshell, this is what really makes up the content of Kitab Ajaib al-Hind. So with this brief introduction to the representative features of Ajaib al-Hind, let me kind of read out to you a few tales which kind of mirror the Ajaib or the wondrous in a slightly more pronounced manner. See, all tales have it in one sense, right? So and probably that will kind of give you also some flavor of Buzurg's tales in general. Let me put it that way. So I'm just going to randomly kind of read out some episodes from Ajaib Wonder. So as I told you, so a ritual suicide in Ceylon, for instance. No. So he says that no, uh, uh, hold on, just give me a moment. Here. Right. So he says that Abu Abdullah Muhammad al-Babishad, so on and so forth, al-Sirafi, right, who was one of the principal shipmasters who used to sail to the land of the gold. So we're speaking of Southeast Asia, and who was one of the best informed of God's creatures in nautical matters. And one of the best and the most respected sailors told me that in the Gulf of Ceylon, in a country called Abrir, there's a very large town that has more than 30 markets, each half a mile long. Gulf textiles of great beauty and value are sold here. This town is divided by a great river which flows into the Gulf. Its people have 600 important pagodas without counting the small ones. And the river is about 400 posting stations long. That is a describing of the place. No. Then he says that there is a mountain outside the town. At its foot is a spring, and beside it a tree of copper and bronze with spiky leaves like used needles on skewers. Opposite it is a large statue that looks like a Negro with topaz eyes. A festival is celebrated beside the statue on a fixed day of each year. The people come and climb the mountain. Anyone who wants to draw near to his Lord drinks and sings and prostrates himself in front of the statue. Then he throws himself from the mountaintop onto the tree, which tears him to pieces. Others throw themselves head first onto the large rock beside the spring that rises at the foot of the statue of the Negro. They crash on the rock and so go to hell. So this is one episode. So but I hope that it gives you a sense of that kind of wondrous thing kind of embedded in this whole description, right? So along with that, see, there's a giant lobster. A lobster grabs the anchor and so on and so forth. And then there's a whole episode of the bird saving a shipwrecked mariners. No, so it again comes from the Ahmad bin Ali bin Munir, the ship owner in Sirab, and he told him that in Ceylon a ship had been wrecked. So then they say that during the stay they'd seen an enormous bird fly down to the island and feed. And when the time for the afternoon's prayer came, these are the shipwrecked sailors, and they see this bird. So when the time for afternoon prayer came, it flew away without knowing where it went. Right? So they decided unanimously to attach themselves to the bird's feet one after the another so that it could carry them away. Indeed, they were overcome with sorrow and knew that they must die there. They had no hope but in that bird, so long as it dropped them near an inhabited place, which is what they had hoped. Right? If it killed them, they had lost nothing. So one of them hid in the trees. The bird came as usual and fed. And when the time came for it to go, the man approached it gently, succeeded in seizing its feet and tying himself to the claws with the bark of a tree. The bird took off, lifted him up into the air. He sat there with his legs crossed over its claws. Right? It passed over the sea and at sunset dropped him on a mountain. The man freed himself, crawled away half dead with tiredness, and then ultimately he kind of is rescued. Right? So he see that the man told him that the name of the Indian, it's somewhere in India. So he meets another man, and he gives him milk to drink and so on and so forth. And so the bird went on bringing men from the island, those shipwrecked sailors, in the same way, and they were all kind of reunited in the village. They found means to get to that part of India where ships were to be found and embarked upon one of them. They told of their shipwreck and the island on which they had fallen. The distance the bird had carried them as far as the village was discovered to be more than 200 persons or farsakhs. Right? So you're speaking of nearly 1,000 kilometers. So it is kind of these kind of episodes too, basically. Then all these episodes about this large bird and so on and so forth, and what you see, and there's one about the mermaids, for instance, that someone had been to Zayla in the land of the Ethiopians and told me that in the Ethiopian sea there is fish just like human being in the body, hands, and feet. The fishermen go afar, unhappy no, unhappy man who spend their lives in unexplored regions on desert shores, in islands and mountains where they never meet another human being, sometimes find this fish with a human face. They hold congress with females. From them are born beings that look like men and live in water and in the atmosphere. Perhaps this fish derived from a union between a man and some sort of fish, a union that would have produced these creatures like men, after which similar unions would have gone on for centuries. In the same way that men coupling with panthers, hyenas, and other land animals and given birth to monkeys, nusnus, and other animals. So he's completely this fantastic problem. Right. In this way, in the same way, the union of pigs and buffalo produced the elephant, the dogs and goats and the wild boar, and the ass and the mare of the mule. If we let ourselves tell all the results of these sorts of union, it would amaze the reader, but we digress from our subject, which is the wonders of India. So no, it is one episode, basically. He speaks about. And so and then see the woodpecker, no, they say there's every bird that flies, there's that every bird that flies in the air on the earth's surface has its like in the sea among the fish. As for me, no, as the narrator says, no, the Gulf of Ayla in Syria, I have seen small fish that has all the colors of a woodpecker and flies ceaselessly in and out of water. Right. And then he speaks about this phenomenon too, natural phenomenon, the sea of fire. So among the peculiarities of the Sea of Faras is that sometimes at the night, when the waves are rough and break against one another, one see them sparkle. One could swear that they were crossing a sea of fire. Right. So all these phenomena kind of take place. So see, I mean, along with that, see, I mean, I'll quickly read out one or two more episodes, and then kind of we'll kind of move further, basically. So what you have now here is this episode which speaks of these giant ants, right? So as I say, Ismailava, the shipmaster, told me that in the high part of the land of Zanj there are gold mines, and in this sandy soil like most deposits. So men dig for gold there and excavate galleries like ants. Out of them comes a cloud of ants as big as cats that eat them and tear them to pieces. No. So and he claimed that in 918, Ahmed bin Hilal, the Amir of Oman, among the presents that he gave the Khalif al-Muqtadir, had a black ant the size of a cat. So shut up in an iron cage and changed up. It died on the way near Zudulaba. So they embalmed it and it reached Baghdad whole, the ant the size of the cat. The Khalif and the people of Baghdad saw it, and those who had brought it said that each day, morning and evening, they had given it 2 months of dried figs to eat. So these are the kind of episodes that kind of we are speaking about, right? And see, finally, a few more, see, I mean, in cannibals too, they said the same man also told me that he had heard about a sailor that had at this particular place called Lulu Bilan, which is the bay at sea. There are cannibals. No, these men have tails. They live between Funsur and Lamuri. So they are speaking of the island somewhere here, basically. Right. And so, and also speaks of some other creature, a close cousin of the monkey. So Muhammad ibn Babishad told me, in Sarira, I saw a woman who owned an animal with human face, except that it was black like one of the Zanj. It had longer hands and feet like than of a man. It had a long tail and hair like a monkey. It sat on the woman's lap, and so he asked her, "What is it?" And she said, "It is a native of the jungles and trees." It gave little cries without meaning. Although it was a close cousin of a monkey, its form and face were like a human being. So see, there's this whole range of kind of tales which they kind of really kind of have a tendency, a propensity towards kind of speaking or recording something fantastical, ajaib, strange, completely kind of in the realm of that ajaib, basically. Right. And see, and finally, I'll kind of know. Oh, I think. Oh well, I think this should suffice, right? So the point is this, no, and in all this, that okay, let me stop sharing the screen too. So this is the ultimate question now. So after, I mean, if you see with the whole notion of Ajaib, wonders in the book Kitabul Ajaib, right? That now finally the question is that no, what do we really ultimately make of these tales, no, steeped in Ajaib? As a genre, we call it kind of trade developed. But no, if you speak of a 10th century text, no, what is the kind of the world that kind of they kind of really kind of understanding and recording and kind of really expressing it? So what are the inferences, if at all, no, we can draw from them? No. So, or let's say put it that, so wrapped in this wondrous, strange, fantastic discourse, right? What information, no, historical, cultural, or otherwise, can we gain about the processes of the 10th century Indian Ocean world? That is my question. And this is where, as I told you, that I'm confounded, for I have no clear insights into the reading between the lines of this tale that speak of Ajab and in this wondrous terms. But as an expression, it seems to be so ubiquitous to this pre-modern Islamic world. It kind of operates as a genre, right? But see, on the face of it, no, this much seems plausible. No, if even if I try to arrive at some kind of a conclusive kind of thought about it, right? That a discourse immersed in Ajab seems to be a distinctive mode of understanding and expressing the pre-modern 10th century Indian Ocean world and its relationships, its connectivity, right? So it is all kind of somehow understood and expressed through the devices of Ajab and Ajaib. But the point is, again, it's kind of a looped question as to how do we really kind of come back to this whole notion, reading between lines. What kind of historical or other information can we really extract out of this, this facade of Ajaib kind of description, basically, right? So but see, I mean, for yet again, certain ideas, right? Certain kind of notions, so, they kind of really emerge out of that, the concerns, ideas, concerns seem to lurk behind this wondrous expression and are manifest time and again. So for instance, the redemptive kind of nature of religion, for instance, this whole kind of this didactic kind of charge to it, the proselytizing charge to it. Maybe this tale steeped in Ajaib kind of are really kind of for some didactic purpose, to kind of really preach you something about the whole morality of something. I mean, that's kind of a thought of my head. Right? Then the other interesting thing is which consistently seems to emerge is this wonder as a device to forge the other. Something which kind of which is immediately outside the orbit of your immediate understanding of your own cultural world and the media. So to forge the other. So topographically, ethnographically, culturally, or even anatomically. So for instance, let's say one has this whole conventional image of a fish. This is how it ought to be and whatnot. So now the moment you encounter this fish or a creature or whatever, outside the bounds of the normal of your understanding, maybe abnormal size, or in other case, abnormal behavior, right? Abnormal attributes. Then the only way to come to terms with it is within the framework of the wondrous, the strange, the fantastic. That seems to be the channel to really even start understanding that if you encounter that. So I think that is how the wonder, Ajab, it just becomes kind of this significant device to really kind of really forge the other, but even after forging it, also kind of trying to understand it, and then kind of bringing it into your own orbit of your knowledge production. Right. So these are certain aspects, of kind of Ajaib that kind of so in recording the realities of their world, which is, I mean, the 10th century Indian Ocean world, it seems to be a mode to come to term with the other, produce and preserve knowledge about the domains outside the immediate orbit of the 10th century of Islamic cultural trend. so to speak, right? So finally, no, so to that extent, no, there is a history, a distinctive attitudes towards imagining, understanding, and expressing their world and its relationship, which pervades the compilations such as Buzurg's Ajaib al-Hind and some other texts too, primarily here, right? So the point is, the finally, so we as historians, scholars, academics, whatever, too often, we privilege conventional histories, chronicles, so on and so forth, to mine for information. That is what really kind of really forms the core of our historical inquiry. But it seems that works like of this genre, Ajaib genre, steeped as they may be in this kind of really kind of real sorcerous kind of tropes, right? Tilismi dunya, basically. So they also need to be kind of that whole genre of literature, which is usually ignored by kind of the conventional historian and art historian and otherwise. So it seems that this kind of this kind of text, this kind of sensibility of Ajaib, what is this trying to really convey to to us as historians? I think it is also necessary that this is also be brought into a central kind of frame of inquiry. It needs to be tapped into more centrally to enrich and kind of recreate our personal kind of historical information, and kind of recreate a particular social, cultural, historical milieu, and as a consequence, to kind of enrich, expand our understandings of how that particular world is imagined and understood at once. So this is the primary kind of drawings from which I can really take that. So, I mean, about the whole idea of the relationship between Ajaib, Buzurg's text, and what might possibly we kind of be able to kind of really extract and draw from it in terms of understanding that particular world in its historical, cultural, and kind of social context. Okay, so thank you. That's I'll end here, and I shall kind of wait to hear more from you now. Working.
Thank you so much, Dr. Latif, for your very interesting presentation.
No.
We have a few questions already in the chat box, so I'll read them out to you. So
Okay.
The first one is by Dr. Parul Pandeyadhar.
Yeah.
She says, "Thank you, Dr. Latif, for this fascinating exposition of the uses and contexts of Ajaib. I couldn't help but draw parallels with the Simhala Avadana, which also speaks of a shipwreck near the island of Lanka and the fantastical hybrid creatures in ancient Indian art. It appears that Ajaib was closely tied to the other, as encountered with travel, exploration, and also conquest and conversion. Perhaps later, this fascination for the other lent it connotations like the aesthetics, miraculous, unprecedented, awe-inspiring, fantastical, and led to its more direct relationships with power and authority." So this is ma'am's question. So should I go ahead and read the other one, or would you like to respond one at a time?
I'm still I'm not very clear about what is the question. I mean, so as Dr. Parul Pandya said, I don't know. Are you around, Parul Ben? So I mean, yes, this is true, because I mean what she kind of mentions. I mean, Ajaib, and it's especially in the relationship to the other, right? I mean, because I mean, what is not comprehensible, that incredulity is kind of it seems to be the reservoir of this whole sensibility of Ajaib, wonder, your awe in face of that thing. So the entire process is to try and understand this, and so what Dr. Pandya writes, I mean, in as I'm reading it, I mean, there's the hybrid creatures and so on and so forth, the aesthetic, the miraculous and unprecedented and awe-inspiring and all that. I think it forms a part of the larger organic rubric where Ajaib kind of negotiated in all this kind of different kind of inflections, so to speak.
So yeah, so essentially I was trying to understand. Thank you. It was absolutely Ajaib, fascinating.
Oh, I don't know, but I'm glad it was worth something. Yeah.
No, absolutely. But no, what I was trying to understand was, I mean, from a historian's point of view,
yeah,
this the term itself, the
Huh.
term Ajab,
Yeah.
and its various, you gave us a fantastic overview of the many uses and contexts of Ajab. But what I was trying to understand was, did it actually begin with all this, exploring the other, whether it is seafaring, whether it is traveling to, encountering strangeness or encountering something different, and then that fascination for the other, that fascination for the different, then becomes also a source of power and control.
Certainly, right, right.
And then it is in the later period, so after this 9th 10th century text, that the more aesthetical, the more you know the other connotations that you explained, did they kind of follow? Was Ajab really more related to what you encounter in
Huh.
distant lands across the seas?
No, but I think it's also how you kind of really kind of try and understand the whole phenomenon of Ajab, and what do you bring into its orbit. For instance, no, I was also thinking of it, I mean, in the context specifically, in a literal context of power and authority and the relationship, like using this whole sense of wonder and awe as a device to kind of really negotiate those relationships. So, I mean, that is the first example I began with, was this whole episode with the Byzantine emissaries in the Abbasid court, and that dates to the 10th century, right? So it is not only a matter of traveling to distant lands and encountering the other and then kind of really emerges of that. I think it's all together, right? Also, to kind of really expand upon what kind of asking, I and this is purely, I mean, I'm also thinking through it like conjectural, right? That more so than the other, I mean, if you look at specifically, the kind of the governing forces which kind of really make something like Ajaibul Makhlukat possible, right? Then, I mean, the fundamental charge is that it is this raw, unattended kind of wonder and awe in the face of nature's creation. The Lord Almighty's creation, that itself is wondrous. No, it's incomprehensible. So there's almost something kind of quasi-theological about it. No, and no, Ajaibul Makhlukat, they'll kind of make their inroads into some kind of Quranic exegesis or something. It can tie it up with that, right? And along with that, with the developments of idea, certainly I think this whole kind of connectivities, that connected medieval world, distant lands, foreign lands, strange behavior, strange customs, that certainly kind of heightens and makes this whole issue or this whole understanding, this sensibility, a lot more pronounced, a lot more codified, I would say, than as it kind of develops over time. So I mean, at least that is my sense. I don't know. I mean, I might be way away from truth or reality or whatnot, but this is the sense I get. Now, this could be there basically. So I mean, the point being that it's not a very linear development, but it's kind of concurrent in terms of what the world of Ajab as it kind of develops. In the textual archive as well as its visual counterpart. I don't know if there answers your question or not, but
no, this is if I can add to what you were saying, it is actually very, very interesting. Parul mentioned Ajab, Ajaib. I think it was a Ghazab. Ghazab is the exposure to the Ghazab experience. So whether these can be objects, these can be places, these can be different kinds of phenomena. Miracles, marvels, etc. So I think these can, and this is certainly a very, very interesting text. And I think, even if it may not be conventionally the kind of material historians use.
Yeah.
It is an unconventional material that historians must use.
Absolutely, right.
And this coexists, as we're showing, with other texts also. I mean, this is the time when people are actually getting to know through huge encyclopedias, where more concrete kind of information about texts and practices of people are also available. So the other thing in terms of othering, I was just thinking as I was listening to your wonderful lecture and the examples that you were giving, tantalizing, awe-inspiring, a strange sensation being created, 2-3 things I was thinking. One is that one is Arab, and then the other thing is Ajam. And then beyond the Ajam, there are these Ajaibul Makhluqat of Hindustan and beyond, And some of these objects from the Ajaibul Gharaib can be then museumized also,
Sure, yeah.
Can be. So Ajaib Ghar, eventually in Hindi and Urdu, basically. So bringing objects from different places and put them for on display.
Display, right? Yeah.
So that is one one connotation of it, and this is the time. And then with reference to conversion to Islam and knowing about religion, I mean, I was thinking about this is the time when, say, roughly crossing over early 11th century, Al-Biruni is writing Kitab al-Hind, which is actually very, very well researched, text into the mythologies, and the stories and the Puranic content of it.
Sure, yeah.
And before Al-Biruni also, many of the Puranic, texts are already made available in Persian and Arabic. Yeah. So there is so much attempt at knowing, and at the same time, so much, attempt at also taming the strange, and exposure to these. So, which is like these seafarer writers are not actually groping in the dark, and they know what they are talking.
No, absolutely, certainly, and that is the reason I said that. No, this is a very deliberate device which they are deploying.
Yes.
That because as you rightly say, because I mean at the same time, in the same exactly concurrent with these texts being produced, you also have Al-Muqaddas, Taqsim and then Al-Masudi and the other geographers and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So there is a slightly different inflection in those texts. But here, these kind of this apparently randomly collected tales and these kind of fantastical things. It has a very distinctive flavor to it, which is completely immersed in this whole idea of Ajab and Ajaib. So, but as you rightly pointed out, all these things, it's fundamentally a knowledge.
So there is an audience. I think there's an audience and readership back home, which is interested to know the seafarers' account of what strange experiences they had, and they had encountered with, to come back to home to report to. So this actually makes it for very interesting, readings, of these things. Certainly, there is this understanding also that Arab and Hind are two different, and Southeast Asia and China are different places altogether. Certainly, they are very, very different from the Arab world. But but knowing these trends, and knowing the knowledgeable, part of these trends is also has a long history. Seek knowledge even in China.
Absolutely. No, and as you very rightly point out, because this also kind of for us. It also really kind of is an indicator of to kind of really see that the 10th century Indian Ocean or the medieval world at large was way more connected in diverse relationship than we ever imagined it to be.
Exactly.
And I think these texts are very important for that too. I mean, travelogues. I mean, for instance, you have exactly around the same time this travels by this Baghdadi kind of minister Ibn Fadlan. And he travels up the Volga and whatnot, and this is the first recorded eyewitness Viking funeral, for instance.
Yes.
So that people kind of speak of this whole in a very, very kind of flippant way, globalization and blah 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 and whatnot. But
there was a world, there was a whole world before the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean,
and it's a much more organically kind of embedded world. Which kind of these kind of texts really kind of bring it home, that whole idea. So I think with that kind of sensitivity, if we approach that whole historical kind of framework with that sensibility of that connectivity, and how things are expressed through this particular it's very, very distinctive tropes.
And one last point I would mention, because there are other people who are waiting
sure.
to, and so one last point I will mention, that this is not actually stopping in the 11th century, because I'm thinking about Miratul Makhluqat, 17th century. Chishti,
you're right, these are the beginnings.
So,
this kind of ushers in, and you will find texts until the 18th, 19th century, which kind of draw from this entire genre and kind of modified, translated, kind of and by translate I don't mean literal translation, but in terms of it's overall a conceptual kind of framework. So you I mean, there are tons and tons of, even with Ajaib al-Makhluqat, there is another one by an earlier version is someone by Muhammad Tusi. But Qazwini's version is the most kind of prevalent, the most kind of reproduced. So instantly you start, you spoke about Arab and Ajam, so instantly these texts will kind of find the counterpart in Persian texts. And then, in fact, Ajaib al-Makhluqat, Qazwini, as late as 16th, 17th century, it holds a lot of fascination in the Bijapur court. So Ibrahim Adil Shah commissions 2 copies. There's one Mughal copy. I think there are 2 of them right now, I mean, which are kind of housed in the Rampur Raza library. So even that, we also have our Indo-Islamic versions of these kind of texts.
Very true. So very interesting, material actually for actually coming to terms with the strange. That is also certainly there. It's not merely about othering, but also understanding the different and the other.
That is what I meant by this whole loop thing.
Fantastic.
You create the other, you forge it, and then try to understand and express it through the devices of Ajab or Wanda. Or at least one component of Ajab or Wanda.
No, true, very, very interesting. There are, I think, maybe Aditi can read out, there are a couple of other questions perhaps.
Yes, sir. I think Shakir has a question. Shakir, if you're here, would you want to ask it yourself?
Sorry, Aditi, I'm outside basically. I cannot.
Okay. Yeah. I'll read out the question.
Please.
Shakir says that he's working on the 3 local Persian tariq of the 17th and 18th century. Each tariq has a separate end section titled Ajaib Kashmir, giving geographical details peculiar to Kashmir. Do you think the category that is Ajaib later on was merely about mimetic description of cities and towns? And which geographical objects featured within the categories of Ajaib, mimetic or imaginary?
Frankly, I mean, I don't know the clear answer to this. I know, but no, I mean, even later, I mean, I don't think Ajaib is only restricted to the mimetic description of cities and towns, because I mean, it certainly carries a more fluid sense of wonder and Ajaib, right? But yes, I mean, maybe it is possible, and as I said, no, I don't know these texts. I have no idea, but I'm just thinking aloud that maybe it is possible that that fluid sense of wonder is now kind of negotiated through its whole urban anchor, so to speak, right, of cities and towns and whatnot, and the objects therein, sites, locales, loci, so on and so forth. So that's one completely kind of unsatisfactory answer that I can kind of give you. And which other geographical objects featured within the category of Ajaib, mimetic, or imaginary? Again, I mean, I am not sure. I don't know. But I mean, if you are focusing on these texts, I should tell you that there is a dissertation which was just completed last year at SOAS, the School of Oriental and African Studies, by this art historian called Vivek Gupta. And he actually speaks about this Indian texts, right, which were produced at the Adil Shahi court and later. So maybe, I mean, if you want to check that out, or if you can somehow lay your hands on that, maybe that might kind of give you more kind of insights into the kind of stuff that you can try to explore, basically. And it also ties up with some text which was created in Malwa, in Mandu. by this author called Shadi Abadi. Right. So I mean, I'm digressing, but no, maybe there might be some kind of relationship to the text that you are working on. So that's all I can say. I'm sorry, I'm not being helpful here, because I don't know. As I told you, this is my first foray into this material, so I have much to learn, frankly, and much to think about. Okay.
So the other one is a small query.
Kindly tell the name of the
Facebook.
treatise again. It's called
Yes.
Kitab Ajaib al-Hind,
right? The Book of Wonders of India. And it is compiled by this sea captain called Buzurg ibn Shahriyar al-Ram Hormuzi. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So there's another question in the chat box.
Yeah, that no, it said that no, I don't have a question, but an observation to share. While I was listening to your talk, I was constantly wondering about the manifestation of Ajaib, Ghazab with relation to Indian Rasmi Mansa tradition. Words such as Bhayanak, Bibhasta, Adbhut, Achraj, etc. Sure, possibly. Probably Professor Parul Pandya can kind of speak a little more to this than I can. But it certainly it's a very plausible observation, I think, because I mean, with our own terminology, even if you speak of this in the purely Indic sense, I mean, there must be this entire kind of idea about kind of Ajab or this wonder, the Vismay, so on and so forth, right? So that's it, and
I'll just take this opportunity to ask a question myself, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
So your talk reminded me about how many writings, especially, for example, those by Frank Oyer Bernier, Travels of the Mughal Empire, has been used over and over again to make the argument about Orientalism. And recently, scholars have sort of critiqued it by saying that it was Bernier's observations were actually not sort of othering or condescending in any sense, but he was just wondering about this new land which he had discovered, and he was writing to the French monarch about India. So this is just a methodological dilemma, that how does one read travel literature and try to make out a difference between what is simply an account of wonderment, amazement, vis-a-vis the travelers or their accounts, which are sort of also focusing a lot on their own culture being superior versus the other culture, which perhaps they labeled as quote unquote inferior. So I mean, how should we tread that path?
I don't know. Does Razi Saab or someone have a more responsibility? Because see, the issue is this, right? I mean, this is our problem. How do it's we as interlocutors of this text? No, how do we read this text, and how do we bring our own kind of bearing? I mean, our own persona. How does it intervene? No, our own prejudices and whatnot. And that is what makes up for an Orientalist reading or something else, right?
Yes, sir.
This certainly cannot be Buzurg ibn Shahriyar's issue. He recorded it. So exactly with Bernier or Tavernier or whoever, right? So that is there, but I mean these kind of this kind of this modes of critical kind of interventions into it. And are you kind of doing it through this? Is Orientalism or is an Orientalist understanding at play in how we are engaging with the text or what?
Yeah.
So I mean, I think all the parameters of caution. It's we have to exercise while engaging with those texts. That oftentimes in the context of interpreting those texts or reading them, we oftentimes tend to overdo it too, right? Because I mean, sometimes our unconscious agent does kind of really creep in. So I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, as I said, I mean, I don't have a cut and black and white answer to this. Right? A cut
Yes,
and
sir.
black.
Yes, sir.
But I think it depends a lot on. So I think see, let me put it this way. It falls into this larger argument of, I mean, what we're trying to kind of really point to, that for historians or otherwise, no, I mean, generally see the texts which have been privileged in terms of looking into history and whatnot. So, and that was precisely the idea that now these kind of texts also be brought into this play. So I think exactly, I mean, for a more enriched, more expansive understanding of that of kind of dealing with history itself, probably that these kind of texts or these genres kind of always kind of peripheral to the mainstream chronicles and whatnot. Right. I mean, one more example. I mean, Professor Raziuddin Aqil's approach. I remember his last lecture when say for 17th, 18th century Mughal history, where you also bring in Zafar Jatali's text, right? Because it's there. It kind of lends you a very different insight into the whole, the operations of the court and so on and so forth, or the princes and whatnot. So satire. So I mean, I also see even Buzurg's text or others' texts or this kind of genre methodologically in the same approach, right? But again, all these earlier Ajaib texts and whatnot, and I mean, as I said, there are certain thematic obsessions which kind of try to emerge from this text, right? This privileging the redemptive aspect of religion and whatnot. Now, can I read it in an Orientalist mode? That yes, I mean, is that superiority of Buzurg religion? So it's a very vexed issue. So I think I mean, the thought itself needs a lot more nuance. I think in kind of really approaching how should I actually kind of not being kind of trapped into this kind of categories of kind of Orientalism and so on and so forth.
Thank you so much, sir. No, this is a very insightful answer.
Actually, Riyaz, you are making some very interesting observations, but you are so reticent that it appears that you don't want to say things, but you are actually saying and making some important observations, even with regard to this question from Aditi. You see, 16th, 17th, 18th century is still early modern. It is not colonial modern. So we are not looking at Orientalism in the writing of even Bernier and other his contemporary European travelers. And when we look at the actual texts of the kind that you are talking about, 10th, 11th, 12th century, 13th century, up to 14th century, this is an older medieval world. Yeah. About which Amitav Ghosh would be saying that this is an old world, and where India and Indian Ocean is so very interesting and important. In that novel, in an antique land, where
Amitav Ghosh, yeah.
Yes. So that's a fascinating piece of work with regard to maritime business with the base in Calicut and the Persian Gulf and Cairo. And so that old world certainly gets affected with the coming of the Portuguese in the Indian Ocean waters in the 15th century. But still we'll say that 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th century is not the time when we are actually looking for Orientalism and etc. Because this is the time actually Europe is learning about the world, about things through the Arabic text, which in turn are derived from the ancient Indian texts or ancient Iranian texts and ancient Greek texts.
Right.
So this is not the time when Europe is actually hostile towards India or towards East. This is the time actually Europe is learning, and therefore and understanding. And therefore, the kind of condemnation that is about Islam, etc., which is to be found very early, in very early period, maybe 7th, 8th, 9th century on the one hand, or 18th, 19th century, when proper imperialism, colonialism, etc., has come. So Islam has to be, sort of demonized. Yeah. And therefore, so that demonization would then come back. But the period that you are talking about is actually very, very interesting. And there is enough information flow about what is also happening, including this wondrous content that you are talking about, to tantalize, to maybe scandalize people with all those stories about, half human, half fish, half
Exactly,
half
right,
human,
right.
half monkey kind of a stuff. But I think this whole world changes, but Orientalism has not happened as yet, and it is was
Exactly,
not
right.
Arabic imperialism either. Arabs were happy in Baghdad, and with all the riches.
No,
that they
and
were-
that is the reason at the outset I said no. It is our problem, not Buzurg's. Right. So because we sitting back with our modified tools of articulation and critical thought and whatnot, we tend to kind of really kind of unnecessarily graft these kind of things over to material which really does not need that kind of unwanted attention, so to speak. Right? So I think, and that is why I said approach with caution and kind of with kind of a little more repose as to know what does that time frame and that material really demand of you as kind of an inquirer, an academic, and an historian. So it cannot be completely indiscriminate. No. Right. Anyway, but so okay, so I guess.
So Aditi, maybe we'll be stopping now if there are
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Professor Latif, for giving your
Thanks
time.
a lot for bearing with me.
it was a very, very interesting presentation, and I'm sure everyone, including me, enjoyed a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We shall definitely look forward to hearing you again.
Oh, thanks a lot. Yes, certainly.
Also, thank you so much to everyone who was with us today. Next week, that is on the 30th and the 31st, we shall be conducting an offline research scholars conference. So it'll be very exciting to see everyone in the department. And post that, we have our next session on the 6th of April with Dr. Aparna Balachandran. So we hope to see you all there. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you again. Thank you. Okay. Bye. So I'll take your leave now.